So welcome everyone to our session, Making the Shift to a Digital Content Delivery Model. I'm sure I'm speaking for all of us when I say that I wish we were in person and able to better collaborate with you all, engage in the conversation. But in today's environment, it's become all the more relevant to ensure that your students do have an easy digital experience and that you can make that convenient access point available to them. Today, I'm joined by Sally Mikhail Bemis of Mikhail Education Corp and Manny Washington with Pearson. And I will go ahead and pass it along to them to introduce themselves, and then I'll introduce myself at the end. Sally, we'll start with you.
Sally Mikhail Bemis with the Chief Operating Officer at Mikhail Education. And I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for joining us today.
I'm Manny Washington with Pearson Strategic Account Executive. Thank you as well for joining us today, and hopefully we can engage you in some information that can help you as you look to go online with your programs. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sally and Manny, so much for collaborating with us to put this together. My name is Jenna Boswell, and I'm a Director of Sales at Red Shelf. I've been with the team for about 4 years, and I focus on aligning with our campus partners to help them make the transition from physical books to digital course materials. And I've had the pleasure of working with Sally and Manny to make this a reality at Mikhail Education Corp. So we'll go from there and kind of walk through our agenda for today's session. So before we get started, I just want to kind of go through a quick agenda of what we're looking to walk through today. So we'll start with taking a step back and ensuring that we're all on the same page so that we know what we're referencing when we talk about digital course materials. Then we'll kind of go through why it's so relevant today. We'll get a perspective on why publishers have made their own transition to start developing towards a digital format instead of the physical at this point. And then we'll pass it along to Sally. She will be giving more details as to exactly, how and why she went about exploring this option for her campus and students. And then I'll actually walk you through a student experience within the learning management system so you can see exactly what students would be walking through in this type of model. And lastly, we'll just kind of wrap it up with some of our expectations for the future, whether that be in the near term and related to COVID, or some of the things we're expecting as digital becomes more pervasive on college campuses. So like I mentioned, I'll kind of start by going back to review what we mean when we say digital course materials. And then from there, we'll go into some of the solutions that we've put into place with some of our partners. So when we're talking about digital course materials, we're typically talking about both ebooks and publisher courseware products. And when we talk about ebooks, we're really talking about publishers granting access to their existing titles so that an e-reader like Red Shelf's e-reader can make them available in their platform. At this point, for example, Red Shelf has about 1 million titles that we distribute across about 400 publishers. So the vast majority of titles do exist in some kind of digital format at this point. And we're also seeing that it's no longer just a digitized version of the physical book. For the first time, publishers are actually developing to the digital format so that they can take advantage of some of the ability to embed multimedia. So that as a student's going through their content, they'll see things like videos or interactive games, and really just giving additional points where they can engage and have an enhanced experience in that digital version. The other thing you'll see is that it's very different from what you would expect from an ebook experience when you're just looking for your leisure reading. So not like your Kindle reading where you're simply just looking to get through your leisurely reading, but in a higher education e-reader experience, you're going to see that students have additional functions that are related to their studying habits. So of course you have the ability to do things like highlight the text and create notes in the margins, bookmarks, but you also have these enhanced functions like the ability to create flashcards or collaborate across different users within the file. You have the ability to have the text read aloud to you or create automated citations. So all of these additional functions that hopefully enhance the student experience, but also lend themselves well to their overall comprehension of the content itself. So then the other side of it is, of course, your courseware. So when we're talking about courseware, we're typically talking about products like Pearson's MyLab or Mastering, McGraw-Hill's Connect product. So products like that where there is an additional element typically that's hosted online. This commonly is referenced as anything from access codes to adaptive learning platforms, online homework solutions. Those are all ultimately publisher courseware. And they can both be delivered through two basic types of delivery models. So we'll see one on the very basic level, the student choice model, where your students could at any time go to an online vendor and purchase the digital format of the text. So there's that, but the one that we're going to be talking about more directly today is the institutional delivery model or an inclusive access model. And when we're referencing either inclusive access or an institutional model, what we're ultimately talking about is the digital course materials being delivered on or before the first day of class directly to students. And it's going to be made available through the campus's existing learning management system and made available at a low cost for them. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on today, because it's been this systematic approach that has made the transition to online instruction and learning much more seamless for our campus partners that already had a program like that in place. All right. Before we transfer it over to Manny and Sally, I also wanted to quickly go through some of those high-level benefits of the institutional model and highlight how it allowed campuses to easily pivot to expand existing programs rather than scramble to ensure that all of their students had the required course materials they needed. Now, with COVID, we did see that a lot of students at times were displaced without their textbooks. And when it was physical, that of course lent itself to the student potentially having an interruption in their learning. So a lot of vendors worked very closely with publishers to ensure that that didn't happen as much as possible and that they could just pick up where they started. But that solution was very much a digital solution. And we were able to put that in place for campuses, whether they had a program or not. But of course, those with the program were very easily able to scale that to additional courses or additional sections. And of course, outside of COVID, this solution is going to make sure that students are mobile and have the materials that they need at any given point in time. So one of the next benefits is the ability to offer unmatched affordability. So when students are all interacting in the digital format, publishers are able to extend an even greater discount to the already discounted digital version of the textbook. So students know that they're not only getting what they need, but they're getting it at the lowest cost on the market through the inclusive access or institutional model. And Sally, I'll pass it to you because I know that you had a couple of points from the institution's perspective on how this affordability has been a major benefit.
Yeah, it's been definitely huge. We've been, it was one of the biggest considerations, but one of the things that you absolutely do save on as well is shipping costs. So I know we're going to get into that later, but the ability to have the books accessible day one of class, and the students have their learning material. But the savings was absolutely significant, and it varies from title to title and publisher to publisher. But that was one of the largest considerations. But more so, I want to go back to the uninterrupted learning and having that ability to have the courseware and the book available on day one of class, so students don't really miss a beat.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other benefit of digital is, of course, that where you're not able to see what students are doing outside of the classroom with their physical materials, you are actually able to have insight into what that activity looks like. So we're able to pass along information on actual student usage. You can see not only how much time are students spending in their content, but where are they spending that time? And hopefully they're not only reading the content, but they're also engaging with the content to take advantage of those additional functions like the highlighting or the ability to create notes, things like that. That will also be tracked and passed along to both the faculty and to the campus so that they can see what are students doing and how are they spending that time outside of the classroom, which is even more important now that there isn't classroom time, so to speak. So So, and I know, Sally, we've also talked about how you've used some of this information or plan to use some of this information within your accreditation process. So anything that you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I think more than anything else is, having those insights available to us, which again, we're still very new to ebooks and digital courseware, but having those insights available to us will allow for our instructors to see where students may need additional help. And I think it's going to help with retention if used properly. But on the flip side of it, I think that the accreditors will appreciate that we are interested in the level of student engagement and being able to we provide free tutoring across all of our institutions and all of our programs, but to be able to see where students are really falling short and may need some additional assistance and be able to give some of that personalized care that so many of our schools are known for. So I'm very excited, and my faculty is very excited about having that additional insight.
Yeah, it's a great point and something that we see heavily utilized just in even the basics of seeing how many times has a student logged in. You'll have the viewpoint throughout the entirety of the course. So hopefully using that information even at the beginning to see, okay, we're 3 weeks into this overall course and this student hasn't even opened the book. So maybe calling out the students that might be at risk while there's still time to make up for that and they don't fall too far behind in their coursework and whatnot. So yeah, great point, and it's something we're really excited to see, continue to expand.
Absolutely.
One of the other issues that COVID has brought to light is that in the scramble to shift to online instruction, a lot of the times there were improvisational instructional tools that were being leveraged. And while that's great, it's also started to pose a lot of challenges for students with disabilities. So ensuring that you are taking advantage of the most sophisticated digital course materials, for example, those at Red Shelf, ensure that you do have the accessibility baked into the content that you're distributing to your students, and making sure that all of your students have an equal opportunity to learn regardless of the environment. And then lastly, another point of consideration is, of course, the operational side of it. So when you're taking a comparison of the distribution of physical materials versus digital, it's pretty easy to see that digital would be the one that is more operationally efficient. When it comes to acquiring the content, selling it, distributing it, it's much easier to manage when it's in a digital format. So making sure that it's already being leveraged through an existing campus system like the learning management system, and then removing things like physical inventory, the need to ship or store the actual physical inventory, all of those things are really removed and not really, they're just another hassle that's taken off the campus's plate. And Sally, I don't know if you wanted to kind of go into that more. I know that that was a major thing for your team.
Yeah, we try not to carry too much inventory at any given time, and one of the things that we were finding is that sometimes if there were shipping delays, that we were really having an issue where, again, it goes back to also uninterrupted learning and the accessibility to the learning material. But being able to make that shift, it allows us to push out the material on the first day of class to our students, and I know that one of the big considerations was, well, what if the students don't stick through add drop? And the wonderful thing is that readers like Red Shelf and others will take that into consideration and allow for that. So it really simplifies the process of the accounting process, the distribution of the material. And, obviously we don't have to eat up a lot of space on any shelves or in any of our rooms, our stock rooms, with this material sitting out there. And just the cost of carrying inventory. So it's been definitely it's been a nice shift from that perspective.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that gives a good idea as to why we're seeing more and more campuses implement a digital course materials program on an institution basis. And from there, I'll actually open this up to Manny to speak from Pearson's perspective on their somewhat recent transition in prioritizing digital development. So to you, Manny, I ask, what does digital mean from an educational publisher's perspective?
I would definitely say it's ease of delivery. As you mentioned, there's been a couple of times we've talked about shipping. And when you go digital, it's very easy to either access codes or through your LMS or through standard integration. It also means you can utilize it on your laptop, your iPad, your iPhone, or any type of device that you're using, either at your school or at home, where you can have online access to gather your content.
Awesome. And did you have any background as to what sort of motivated Pearson to move to that digital first development versus, developing strictly to a physical version of the text?
Well, pre-COVID, I think it was last year, middle of last year, we made an announcement that we were really focusing on going digital as a company. This was also to eliminate and help our schools with costs, being able to help them transition to the digital world, which we're seeing it's going very fast from a digital perspective. So this was something that we really want to focus on. Pearson does still offer print titles, but when we first initially do any type of digital content or any type of new editions, we make sure our digital content is done first. So the ebook is done first before we start working on the print title. So this was something that, as we said, wanted to make sure our schools had a cost benefit of going digital. And just from a perspective of when watching students start from K-12 and moving up, they're all learning on these devices now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I know we've partnered, both you and I, and then of course across both Pearson and Red Shelf, we collaborate very closely to work with a lot of our campuses to implement these institutional or inclusive access models. So we both are seeing that continuing to trend upward, and more taking advantage of the benefits of digital. So definitely is in line with where we're seeing the market go, and the need to address the digital native students that are only increasing in number, like Manny said, starting from K-12. So anything else that you'd like to add to, kind of Pearson's side of this part of the conversation?
Well, we did touch upon inclusive access as well, so I don't want to overstate that, but inclusive access is the huge model that we are definitely working with our schools on. Just the first day, students receive their materials, instructors are trained, the school has their LMS working and functioning ready, and the students are receiving a great price for their products. So this is something that we also want to model and make sure that schools are taking advantage of that as well and being a good partner with them.
Awesome. Perfect. So Manny, we had pulled together this is some of the information directly from Red Shelf's nationwide sales, just in giving an idea as to what we're seeing on an average for actual ebook costs. And of course, it breaks it down across both ebooks and courseware starting in 2018. And you can see that it's continued to pretty dramatically decrease the average price. Any viewpoints into this particular data or anything like that, Manny?
I think when you see the pricing decline occur here, it has a lot to do with inclusive access models. We are definitely becoming better at obviously delivering our digital content. This also provides, when we become more efficient, prices are able to come down quicker. So on an average, you can get an ebook for $21.31, as you noted here. And there will be some ebooks that are a little bit more expensive based upon the program and the courseware that you're using. But for the most part, ebooks are ranging from $20 to $25, as I said, for those probably those gen ed type courses. It's worked out very well for us, and we've seen a lot of our schools encouraged by this, and it helps their bottom line. So that's definitely something we try to achieve and work on, help with the bottom line, get the students their jobs, get them out into the field and start working.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something to note is these prices are strictly related to inclusive access programs. So, you know, the average cost, I think on a national basis, last we ran it was about $31. So that's where you really are seeing that, you know, it's not just the standard discount, but it is going to offer your students an even greater discount to that digital format. So it has been really exciting to see that price continue to decline. That was very much one of Red Shelf's founding missions, was to lower the cost of education. So it's really exciting to see that we're actually doing our job here.
I agree. We're trying to do it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Manny, I know that these were some of the numbers that you had pulled together from some of Pearson's data and what you're seeing and expecting in the market, if you wanted to speak to that.
Definitely. So we've ran some studies over the last, I think it was over the last 6 to 8 months, and just based upon what we're seeing, obviously ebook sales are increasing pre-COVID as well. And obviously, it's expanded even higher now. We haven't done any of the studies since COVID has hit, but 20% increase in ebooks. Print packages are definitely declining as schools are looking more towards the digital world, more the hybrid world, to get their students information quicker and being able to utilize the devices that they have, from their iPhones that I mentioned before to laptops or iPads that they have. And then for the most part, we've seen 90% of the students have some type of digital device in their hands. More so probably I'd say iPhones or any of those types of phones, but also the iPads are very popular for our students. Laptops were probably on the lower end when we looked at the studies, but at least 90% of these students have some type of digital device where they can access their materials.
And it's been incredible to see how mobile users are becoming, whether it's, you know, the learning management systems that now have app-based versions so students can access it directly on their phones. I can't imagine reading my content on an iPhone, but we're continuing to see more and more students use it in that format for short studying sessions and things like that. So seeing consistent trends on our side as well.
Yeah, I will say that you have some students who, and Sally, I'm sure will speak to this as well, but you have some students who really want print materials over e-text. So it's a major transition for them. For the most part, we are seeing success with that, but there are still some challenges and baby steps that still need to be made at some of our schools we work with.
Absolutely. And I think we've continued to see the trend of those that are adamant that they have a physical version continue to decrease. I think one of the NAC student survey watches has shown over the last 5 to 10 years or so that it continues to decrease in those numbers of those students has continued to decrease. And it's been interesting to see, you know, I know there are campuses that I work with where a free version of the physical is given and no student goes to actually pick it up just because there's the additional step of going to pick it up. So it has been kind of fascinating to see that trend start to uptick in the other direction. And with that, we've popped up our slide early for Sally, but I wanted to make sure that Sally got the opportunity to really give us some background as to why they were looking to implement a program like this, and then speak to kind of how it became so integral as this transition to online instruction started to occur. So with that, Sally, I will pass it to you to also give some background as to who Mikhail is and the campuses that you oversee, what those demographics look like, and anything else that you think would be helpful.
Sure. We operate 5 campuses in 3 states, 2 different accreditors, and our programs vary from anything from allied health and trade certificate programs to degree programs in healthcare and business. And so it's a lot, you know, that we're bouncing around and managing, and they're all, we found out during this pandemic situation, pretty much everything we offer is an essential career, you know, so that's been kind of exciting to see that. Unfortunately, is under terrible circumstances. But the initial charge in this was like, you know, I'm not going to say it was cost. It was probably initially the inclusive access that was kind of exciting. We were seeing delays in getting our books, you know, and it was a constant thing across all publishers. And sometimes it was a week or two into a 6-week mod or 4-week mod, and that's pretty significant. You're looking at 20 or 30% of the module where the students could be without their books. So that was actually one of the things. Well, we started thinking, like, what if we go ebooks? Then our students could have their books quicker, and we'd be able to, we wouldn't be losing that time. And then it was like, well, let's look at the cost differential. And then we found out how significant the cost savings would be. So that was another big, big consideration. I would say that those were probably the top two. Then as we started to actually really look into it more and more and research it, we found that that there was courseware that would allow for additional student engagement. And that was one of the things that we as an organization always keep at our forefront. In fact, we have a weekly call about student engagement, how to make the classroom fun and learning fun. So that was another thing that we found, that as we started to dig into it, that publishers were really kind of taking that to heart and trying to figure out, and I use the word publishers loosely, so Manny, correct me, because I think that you guys are more, learning partners, training partners in this, with the material that you're putting out. And I think that you try to do a very good job about listening to your customers and seeing some of the things that we're finding in the classrooms, and trying to incorporate that in the development of the material that you're putting out there for the space. The other exciting thing was accommodating the various learning styles. And as we demoed Red Shelf and other readers, I love the idea of having, the material being read to you if it need be, and read in your dialect or with the accent that you're used to hearing. Like if you're a foreign student who's an immigrant and you're used to hearing English in an accent, or that it made it easier to actually understand the material. So that was actually pretty provocative as we started to consider this. And then, as we touched about before, was the analytics and the insights that were available to us and our faculty, and being able to identify students who may be at risk and be able to really nip that in the bud and catch those early on before it became an issue. So that's another big thing for us. All of us work very hard not only to get students on the front end, but to keep them all the way through, because all of our accreditors are looking at our graduation, our completion rates, and then essentially our placement rates are the bread and butter. We don't do what we do if we can't place our students. So all of this is really important, and it was a big thing in considering the bigger picture of moving to a learning format that Gen Z is growing up with. We're finding that maybe some of our older learners, it might be a little bit more of a transition for them to be able to make. But let's be honest, as we look 5 years down the line, we're going to be getting more and more students who never lived in a world without technology, or the accessibility to technology. And this does not happen overnight. This transition does not happen overnight. I think one of the things that I did miss that I think is also important to touch on, and Manny can probably weigh in on that, is the updating of the editions. Like, when we see an update to an edition of a book with a printed book, it's a little bit harder, especially when you're working on a modular program with the wheels, and you may have students sitting side by side with each other with 2 different editions of a book. And then it makes it a little bit more confusing for the instructor and the students themselves. So if we have the digital versions, the publishers are able to push out the most updated editions across the board. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Manny, but that was something that was actually another consideration.
No, you're right about that, Sally. It does help when we have digital content. We definitely try to keep our schools 6 months, 8 months notified of any new editions that are coming out, especially if it's digital content, gets prepared for it. And again, with inclusive access type model, you're prepared on that first day, your faculty's prepared, and your students have access to that content. One of the other things too, and I think you were alluding to, was if there is, sometimes you have mistakes in printed copies. If there is a mistake within a digital book, we're able to change that within sometimes a day, but most likely within a few weeks, we're able to change that content and send it out via the digital platforms. So you have the most up-to-date content and it's corrected pretty quickly.
Yeah, which is huge. It's,
Yes.
it's definitely a big thing for us. You know, and sometimes they're unintentional, but we'll find, like, you know, every so often, and, you know, even if it's rare, that we'll find we'll have an instructor, or even sometimes a student, that will identify, you know, possibly something that may not be quite right, and we're able to relay that message and have it corrected pretty quickly.
Great. And then Manny, I know that, you know, I spoke to some of the benefits of analytics from Red Shelf's perspective in the standalone ebook, but I know that within some of Pearson's courseware products, there are some more robust analytics that are made available. Do you have, are there any points on Pearson's platform that might be helpful to share about what analytics you pass along?
Definitely. Our analytics are based upon obviously the products that you use within Pearson, but from those products you can take from a multi-campus perspective, you can see if all your campuses are teaching the same courseware at the same time in the same perspective. That way students are learning all the same materials they should be learning. Also, you can take it from a problem perspective. You can look at how instructors are teaching the course. From accreditation purpose, you can use this for accreditation. And also from a learning objective manner, you can take a look and see how the learning objectives are meeting criteria that you have for your school. And those are just some of the unique ways you can use the data analytics. As we know, data is very big right now. The one thing that we want to provide is a partner with you, being able to help you with your accreditation visits and give you all the information that is needed for that.
Perfect. Well, then from there, Sally, I was hoping that you could delve a little bit deeper into what it looked like when we started implementing this on campus, kind of what you were doing prior to putting this in place. I remember our initial conversation with Paul, who's running your Canvas instance, and I know that there are a lot of other back-end conversations that happened to make sure that everyone was on the same page and that we could roll this out in a seamless manner. So maybe talking through some of that process and who was involved would be helpful.
Sure. The one thing that I would say is that we're still trying to figure out pieces of this. We don't have it all figured out, and we're working on our modular programs that have been in play for quite a while. Those are the ones that we're kind of struggling with still at this point. But any new programs we're launching with ebooks. But one of the things that we initially started with was, okay, well, let's see if all of our titles are even available. Like, so we started the conversations with our various publishers, and you know, initially we have many of our titles are through Pearson. So Manny and I started this conversation a long time ago, and then it was like, what does that pricing model look like? You know, what are some of the things that we should consider? And then the question came up about, like, well, what are you using for an e-reader? And I'm like, wait, I have to have a reader? Yeah. And then, like, who should I talk to? Then we started looking at the various vendors out there for the e-readers, and after a couple of, looking at 3 different vendors, we did settle on our partnership with Red Shelf, and I have to say we've been pleased so far. It's been a good partnership. But then it was like, you know, looking at it like course by course, program by program, course by course, and then really delving into how do we get this going. And we found that initially the newest programs that we were launching, and we're constantly launching programs, they were the easiest ones, obviously, to launch out the gate. But one of the other considerations really was hardware as well. And what do we use for hardware? We have to factor that cost in if we're going to be providing it. What are the best tools? And then we started to think about all the other tools that we had in our toolbox, such as our LMS. We also are Microsoft Office 365 across the organization. Then we started thinking about the logistics of also, you know, how do we get emails, like student issued emails out to every single one of our students? Because this was new territory for us. You know, we're 5 schools, and you know, our student populations, you know, we had to factor in, did we have the bandwidth to really take this project on as an organization? So we found out that, like, you know, hardware has also been a bit of an issue for us. I'm not going to say that that's been an easy thing. And I talked to a lot of other schools that had done this in the past, and you heard everything from Kindles to iPads to people using the Chromebooks and some of those considerations. So that's something that you really have to look at, you know, within your own organization. What can you bear? What are the logistics of getting that hardware, and then also pushing it out, and who's going to help administer it, and do you have the IT support for that? These are all things that really need to be considered. So we're still, we had settled on a piece of hardware, and then COVID hit, and manufacturing in China was interrupted, and then it was really hard to source hardware. So now we're kind of exploring some other options as well. We were looking at a Lenovo tablet, and now we're, you know, that's Android based, and now we're looking at some potential Microsoft products, which again are a little bit more costly than going the Kindle route or going, you know, we wanted to do what was in the best interest of our students. And now we're kind of coming to the conclusion that maybe we don't use just one standard piece of hardware. Maybe it depends on the program that we're going to be using that hardware for. Maybe it's a tablet for some programs, but more of a laptop hybrid tablet for other programs. So these are all things that you really have to think about and, you know, factor in the cost when you're making that transition, because it turns out that you may be saving money on the books, but don't think that the cost is going to stop there. You have to think about cost of hardware. You have to think about cost of LMS if you're going to be using going the LMS route as well, and really weigh those, you know, factor that into your cost benefit analysis of this transition.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I know I mentioned, obviously, when we initially started sitting down, we were including Paul from the Canvas perspective, making sure that he was fully involved in the implementation rollout. Then I know that you also were speaking with business office contacts and academics. Was there anyone else that kind of played a part in those conversations?
Faculty, yeah, we roped in our faculty, we roped in our campus directors, we had our IT department involved, our business and accounting, you know, the business officers and accounting were involved when we started to consider all of this. But yeah, we really found that you can't make these decisions in a vacuum, because when you started to think about it, there was going to be a ripple effect across many of the functional areas within the organization. So having those conversations with those departments involved was really critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for most of our campuses, the academics team plays such a big role here, because of course they're the cost savings and operational benefits, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that it's giving the best academic experience for students as well. So not only do they have the content and access to it, but is it giving them a good overall experience as they transition? So makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, the faculty, not only did they have to be able to use the e-reader, but they had to use the hardware that their students were going to be using. So, because let's be honest, there are going to be times when they're going to have to support the hardware as well. If they're sitting in a classroom with their students and something comes up, they need to be able to answer some questions. So we had to get the technology into their hands first for, you know, I wanted them to have it in their hands for a few weeks to be able to get all the kinks worked out before we actually pushed it out to the students as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Perfect. Well, I know that, you know, not only did Sally need an e-reader, of course, to put this in place, but learned more about the benefits of having a digital platform in place to kind of aggregate the process across the entire experience and implementation of a program like this. So I wanted to just quickly touch on some of the benefits of working with a platform provider in just acting to create that overall solution across all publishers. Of course, we're working with Pearson, and as Sally mentioned, they are a large number of the titles that are currently adopted there, but most campuses, of course, work with other publishers, and so it does help to have an aggregator that already has a number of those relationships already established. So that's really where our content delivery system, or CDS, comes into place in offering that end-to-end distribution solution. So for some of our campuses, it starts at the point of adoption. For most of the campuses in this space, of course, you have more of a centralized decision-making process when it comes to adoptions. But for those that where the adoption starts at the point of the faculty member, our adoption platform looks to automate and manage the collection of adoption details directly from the professors. And then from a distribution standpoint, of course, we want to ensure that there is a single point of distribution for all of the digital content that your students need. So whether it's an ebook or a courseware product, the students have one consistent click-through path for all that they're going to be accessing. And through that, we also offer an automated opt-out. So the Department of Education, through programs like this, or anytime a student charge is placed directly on a student account, they want to ensure that the student has the ability to opt out of that charge. So Red Shelf's platform also allows for an automated opt-out to be available to the students if that is a choice that they want to make. And we ensure that the reporting and everything is easy between the campus and Red Shelf, and that there's no need for the campus to kind of manage the indecisiveness of a student that doesn't know if they want to be in or out of the program. Ultimately, they'll know where they stand at the end of that opting deadline. And then from there, from a learning experience, of course, we are constantly iterating on our e-reader and taking direct feedback from our students into play when it comes to our development. Even our text-to-speech that we've been speaking about, that came directly from our students saying, we want this ability, so we built it out for them, and now they all have access to it. So we're always looking to ensure that the digital experience is one that is suitable for both the digital natives and those who might be using digital for the very first time. And then again, as I talked about, the aggregation doesn't just come from our procuring of all the different titles across all different publishers, but we also make sure that we're managing pricing negotiations with the publishers so that those can be leveraged by the campus instead of put into place individually with each publisher. And then also streamlining the invoicing process. So instead of you having 20 different invoices from 20 different publishers, you have one through Red Shelf, and then we pay out the publishers on your behalf. So just removing a lot of the back and forth that might have to exist, or additional workload if you were to do it on an individual basis. And then lastly, of course, we've got our analytics that ensure that your teams know what's going on in the content outside of the classroom, and it gets passed back to faculty members. And then, Sally, I also figured that it would be good to kind of touch on, how this program has evolved since COVID-19 has become, has necessitated a transition to more online content, and what having it already laid out has done to benefit the campus.
Yeah, fortunately, when COVID-19 hit and we had these shelter-in-place orders come in, we didn't necessarily have everything ready to go, but we had all the ingredients in the kitchen to cook the meal. So we were able to pivot pretty quickly. We had an LMS already on deck. We already had, our engagement with Red Shelf. We had all of the pieces together. We had Office 365, so we were able to communicate with our students and be able to really put everything in play to where within a week we were really able to pivot all of our programs into a hybrid model. And that's really from being like 95% residential, programs. So that was it was actually a fortunate scenario for us that we had everything ready to go. That being said, that I think that it's really, for many of the schools I'm sure that are going to be watching this, it kind of has made us evaluate what our strategic plan is going to be going forward. And I think that we had a situation at one of our campuses where our students hadn't gotten their books, and again, it was shipping delays, it was it was printing. And with the help of Manny and Jenna, we were able to push out at least e-copies of those books for the period of time until we were able to get the printed copies of the books in the students' hand. So those types of things were really fortunate for us that we had all of that in that relationship and everything ready to go. Jenna, one of the things that I don't think we touched on, and I think Manny, you could also weigh in on this, is that we're able to still, like with the delivery of the ebooks, we still, the student still has the prerogative to be able to print a portion of the book if they want. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Just based upon how many pages, based on I think page counts, it could range from, if it's 300 pages, that means $20, and 500 pages for $30, or something. There's something in that pricing range, depending on how the relationship is established with the agreement. But yes, there is that option for students if they still want printed copy. It's usually a loose leaf book that they receive if they need the print copy just for their own sake.
Right. So I think that was one of the other things that we really, that anyone considering moving the ebooks should know, that it doesn't have to be one or the other per se, that there is the option for the student to be able to do both if they really want to, or you as an institution can choose to do both, provide the student the printed copy as well as the ebook. But fortunately for us, like I said, we were ready to go. We had all the pieces, available and at our fingertips. It was just really the execution. And fortunately, having all of those at our fingertips allowed us to pivot within about a week to have everything online. And I'm actually very proud of our team for being able to do that.
Yeah, it's a significant lifting of a lot of transitioning there, I can only imagine. Just to speak to the printing point that Sally brought up, Manny was speaking to the print upgrade option that is made available, but just to clarify, in most titles, publishers have given students the ability to print a certain percentage of the text as well. So usually anywhere between 10 to 30% of the title can also be printed. So that's at no additional cost. And then if they did want the entirety of the text made available to them, publishers do typically make a low-cost option available in just a loose leaf version that can also be purchased. So a couple of different options there, really just to cover all your bases for students that might not be looking to make the transition to digital immediately. The great thing is while they're waiting for the print to come, they still have access to all their content because they have the digital version.
Effect notification.
Yeah. And then, let's see, there we go. So today, Sally, I know that you've spread this solution across a wider number of courses, but from your perspective, what does it kind of look like today for the vast majority of your courses?
We're still very new in this, but I think at our newest campus, which is Las Vegas College, we've been able to, we've actually started several new programs, and we found that with our degree programs, it was definitely an easier transition than with our modular programs. So I would have to say that Las Vegas College at this point is going to be about 60% rolled out as of July, which is pretty exciting for us. And any new programs at any of our other campuses, again, will launch on the digital platform out the gate. So little by little, we're going to probably be, I would say over the course of, I'd like to say over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll probably be fully implemented.
Great. And then, as promised, I did want to walk through the actual student experience. And at Sally's campuses, like she mentioned, they are using the Canvas learning management system, but it's very similar across all of the higher ed LMSs, and most publishers and platforms do have direct integrations into each of them. So from the student's perspective, they're simply going to log into their LMS just as they would any other day. And then our tool is embedded into their courses. So it's just a simple LTI tool that is usually very familiar to your LMS teams. And it can be customized either in how you label the tool or how you place the tool within your actual system. But it's the LTI that really allows for the single sign-on experience. So as the student clicks into the tool, are then taken directly to, in this case, Red Shelf's page, and it's their My Courses page where they would see any of the courses where we're delivering digital content for them populate. And there's no need for them to create a username or password. It automatically creates all of that for them based on their Canvas credentials. So then from there, the student simply clicks View Course Materials, and then any of the digital content that is required within this course is going to populate for them. So you'll see that when it's simply an ebook, the student can click Start Reading, and they'll automatically open up the ebook for them. And then we've recently been integrating it directly into publisher courseware as well. So we started that with Pearson, and it ensures that the student can remove the need for access codes or specific course keys, and instead simply take advantage again of a single sign-on experience that would take the student directly to the My Math Lab platform, where again, they don't need to log in. It's going to take them directly in and create their account for them. So really just ensuring that their ease of entry is there for them, and there aren't any barriers to getting access into exactly what they need, so that day one, they walk into class and they can hit the ground running because they're not waiting for something to ship or confirming with the professor which title is needed. It's all just made available for them. So then I'll move to just kind of an open question for all of us as to what we're really expecting with the future of digital content delivery. I can speak from Red Shelf's perspective to say that, when the pandemic did hit and we were finding that students were left without their content, we've been able to implement this program across thousands of additional sections so that students could just automatically pick up where they were. They just started accessing their digital version via the LMS. We've also been supporting hundreds of thousands of different points for students that just needed access to an ebook because they didn't have their physical book. So taking advantage of some of the programs that we put into place just to offer continuity for that spring semester, we've seen hundreds of thousands of impressions and students going in to access their ebook. So it definitely was a need that we were very happy to fulfill and be able to meet for students across campuses throughout the nation. So we were excited to see that. But I also think that in general, we've spoken a lot about analytics, and I think that we'll continue to see that as a very big focus for all content creators and those who distribute that content. And I'm hoping that we'll see closer collaboration across those different platforms so that you could get a more aggregated view of all of those analytics in one place. So hopefully that's something that we'll see in the near term that's kind of outside of the immediate need for a positive digital experience overall. Sally or Manny, is there anything that you all would add from your perspectives?
I would also say, well, just to piggyback on what you said, we've also, during the COVID outbreak, have helped hundreds and thousands of students who might have been using a print copy at the school, and school was closed down. They needed access to the ebook, so we were allowed to send those access cards out to them, access codes, and allow them to work on their materials to finish up their courseware. We definitely feel there's going to be an uptick, as you saw from our previous slides. We were already seeing an uptick of 20% or higher. That number we definitely feel is going to continue to grow, just based upon some of the things that are happening at many of the schools across the country, including universities. So we definitely see more digital content delivery. We're prepared for that. We started this back over a year ago, and I think it will continue to expand and grow as far as the digital content delivery.
Absolutely. And thanks for calling that out, Manny, because we could not have done it without our publishing partners allowing us to distribute their content. And so we were closely alongside with you all, and it was great to be able to come together and make that happen for students.
Definitely. A great partnership.
Yeah. And we are seeing, we've already seen, a number of programs that either weren't expecting to scale to the rate at which they are for summer. They're definitely speeding that up, and the transition to more digital is happening much more quickly than we had anticipated. And we don't see that changing for fall. For the most part, those that do transition into digital are likely to continue in that digital format versus, transitioning back. So we do see this really just ramping ramping up the overall expansion of digital usage faster than anticipated overall.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true in the sense that, you know, right now we're finding that a lot of our students, based on their demographics and also the geographic areas and the type of programs that we're offering, maybe not as ready to make that digital transition. We did survey them during this whole COVID process and found that about 50% of our students were doing most of their classes, attending most of their classes and doing a lot of their work on their phones. They just didn't have the accessibility to the technology for it. But I think that given what's happening with schools trying to decide whether they're going to be going back to school in the fall or not, and the transition on not just on the K through 12 side, but across all of higher ed, that we're going to find that many more students coming prepared with the technology and the ability or the familiarity with digital content and digital learning. So it's going to make this transition for our space, the career ed space, that much easier, you know, to make down the line, because these students from all school districts, from all socioeconomic and demographic profiles are going to be much more familiar with the tools available for this type of learning.
Absolutely. And then to wrap it all up, I think that it might be helpful to pass along any advice or things that you've seen, you know, from Manny's perspective, things that you've seen be helpful in rolling out a program like this. And then from Sally's perspective, you know, what overall things did you learn as you were putting this into place?
I'll start off. For those schools exploring these type of initiative, obviously a plan, some type of plan ahead of time, it would be very good to have. Try to be prepared as possible. That means doing some homework on finding out what works best, what works well with your LMS, if you have an LMS. If you're going to use a device, what device would work well for your programs. I'd also work with the publishers who you do most of your business with to make sure if you're using their products, you get trained up on their products. Especially if there's labs that go along with certain products and programs. I'd also make sure that you communicate with your publishers on what your needs are, and also with your ebook providers, such as RedShelf, to make sure that they're all in agreement on what would be the best plan to roll out the materials to your schools. From there, I think, you know, it's a matter of possibly some baby steps moving forward on some things, but if you kind of take those initiatives immediately up front, I think you put yourself in a good position to be successful.
From our side, just from the institutional side, I would suggest again that you just get everybody involved in the process, that you really consider the impact that it's going to have on every single one of the departments within your organization, and have those stakeholders involved in the transition. That's going to be really critical to the success of your program, and you know, and just making it less painless for your students.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say from our perspective, our advice is always to over communicate, both at the beginning when you're pulling together all the different stakeholders, but then also, you know, once you are rolling it out, making sure that students and faculty know what you're talking about, know how to get their content, why this program is beneficial for them, and just really making sure that every I is dotted and T is crossed to ensure that it does roll out smoothly. So even to the point where we have a dashboard that allows you to communicate directly with each of those stakeholders to make it easy for you. So we do find that communication is really one of the key points of success when putting a program like this into place. All right, well, with that, thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. We are all open to be a resource for any questions, concerns, review of any road bumps that we've hit, sharing our knowledge base as we've put this across a number of different campuses, and of course, Sally's expertise in putting this in place on her campus. So feel free to reach out. I've posted all of our contact information here, and we are more than happy to collaborate with anyone and anyone as a resource. And thank you, Manny and Sally, so much for your time. I hope this is beneficial to a number of campuses out there.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate it. And thank you, Sally, as well. Great teammates.
Yeah. Likewise, it's been such a pleasure to work with both of you in this whole process. And to anyone out there, it always sounds easier in concept than it is in practice, but we're here to be a resource to all of you.
Most definitely.
Perfect. Have a great rest of your day.